"You're bleeding," Jacob Stone said, crouching beside the woman on the playground bench, his voice calm but concerned as he pulled tissues from his backpack. Lena Grayson blinked down at her palm, surprised to see a thin line of blood trailing from a small cut. "Oh, I didn't even notice." She laughed softly, more from embarrassment than pain. "Guess that's what I get for trying to catch a frisbee meant for a 6-year-old. Jacob glanced over to where his son, Dylan, was now climbing the slide with a plastic fire truck in hand. "He likes to throw things. I keep telling him he's not training for baseball." She smiled, watching the boy. "He's adorable." Jacob pulled a small first aid kit from his worn canvas backpack tucked between snacks, a math workbook, and a slightly crumpled bus schedule. "Here, let me clean that up." "You carry a first aid kit?" "Single dad," he said simply. "It's either that or let him use band-aids like stickers and bleed all over the place." He gently dabbed her hand, and Lena winced, but he worked quickly and carefully, wrapping a strip of gauze over the cut. "There," he said, pressing the tape down. "You'll live." "Thanks," she said, watching him curiously. His hands were strong but steady, his touch gentle. There was something about him rugged, tired eyes, a jawline shadowed with stubble, and a quiet kindness that made her chest feel oddly warm. "I'm Jacob," he said, standing and offering her a hand. "Lena," she replied, shaking it. "Do you always rescue women at playgrounds?" He let out a short laugh. "Only those who are brave enough to die for flying frisbees." Dylan ran over then, breathless and sweaty. "Dad." "I made it to the top of the slide without touching the lava rocks." Jacob ruffled his son's hair. "I saw. You're basically invincible." Lena crouched down to Dylan's level. "That's an important skill. Lava rocks are no joke." Dylan beamed at her like she'd just given him a trophy. "You two come here often?" Lena asked as they watched Dylan run back toward the jungle gym. "Every day after school," Jacob said. "It's free, and it keeps him moving." There was something in the way he said that matter of fact, but with a quiet strain. Lena's gaze drifted to his backpack again. The frayed straps, the patched elbow of his denim jacket. He wasn't struggling for style, he was just struggling. "I've never seen you here before," Jacob added, glancing at her. "I don't live far," she said vaguely. "I just needed some air today. Rough morning." She hesitated, then nodded. "Something like that." Truthfully, she'd just walked out of a tense board meeting in heels that cost more than his rent, ditched her driver 3 blocks from her penthouse, and wandered into the park wearing a hoodie and sneakers she hadn't touched in years. She needed to feel human again. And now, this man, this kind, tired, undeniably attractive stranger was making her feel more grounded than she had in weeks. "You know," she said, "you're the first person who's spoken to me today without asking me for something." Jacob gave her a sideways look. "Well, I could ask for a coffee, but I feel like I'd owe you a second bandage." Lena grinned. "I'd risk it." He looked at her for a beat longer, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "There's a coffee cart near the entrance. Cheap but decent." "Perfect," she said. He called Dylan over. "Hey, buddy. Want to walk with us to get a hot chocolate?" Dylan nodded excitedly. "Can I get the marshmallows this time?" Jacob gave Lena a look. "You'll regret saying yes." They walked together slowly, Lena holding her bandaged hand close to her chest, heart fluttering in a way she didn't recognize. Jacob talked about Dylan's obsession with dinosaurs, about the second job he worked nights at a mechanic shop. In the summer, he couldn't afford to take Dylan to camp, so he built a fort in the living room instead. He didn't complain. Not once. And somehow, that made it even harder to breathe. They reached the cart, and Jacob ordered 2 coffees and a hot chocolate with a ridiculous amount of marshmallows. Lena tried to pay, but he waved her off. "You already got injured on my watch. Let me handle this part." She watched as he fished crumpled bills from his wallet, handed them over without blinking. It wasn't about pride. He just wanted to do something small for her. They sat on a bench nearby while Dylan sipped his drink and hummed to himself. "So," Jacob said, "what do you do, Lena?" She hesitated. "I manage investments." "Sounds fancy." "It can be," she said carefully. "Mostly, it's a lot of talking in spreadsheets." He nodded. "Well, you seem way too normal for spreadsheets." She laughed, but inside, guilt twisted. She wasn't just some investment manager. She was CEO of Grayson Capital, a name that made stock markets twitch and real estate developers jump. Her face had been on the cover of Forbes last year. She wasn't just rich, she was a billionaire. And here she was, sitting next to a man who didn't have enough for summer camp, drinking cheap coffee, and wishing she could stay in this moment forever. I should probably get going, Jacob said, checking his watch. I've got a shift starting soon. Where do you work? Auto shop on 34th. I fix busted engines, change tires, that kind of thing. I bet you're good at it. He shrugged. Keeps the lights on. She stood with him, and Dylan tugged her hand. Will you come back to the playground? Dylan, Jacob said gently, don't pressure people, I'd like that. Lena said, cutting him off. Jacob looked at her, really looked. You sure? You don't owe us anything. I know, she said quietly, but I think I'd like to see you again. He gave a small nod. All right then. Lena watched them walk away, her fingers brushing over the bandage on her hand. She hadn't planned on falling for anyone. But now, all she could think about was the man who'd put her back together with a piece of gauze and the warmth of his voice. And he had no idea who she really was. Lena stepped into the elevator of Grayson Tower the next morning, her reflection staring back at her from the mirrored walls. Power suit, sharp heels, and a face that had learned to wear indifference like armor. She barely recognized the woman who, less than 24 hours ago, had shared a cardboard cup of coffee with a man who didn't know her last name or her legacy. Miss Grayson, her assistant called as she stepped off the elevator, heels clicking against the marble floor. You've got the quarterly forecast meeting at 10 and a call from the Tokyo office waiting. Push Tokyo an hour. And tell legal I want to see the acquisition report by noon. She replied without missing a step. But as she passed the glass conference room, her eyes caught on a young intern laughing too loud at something on her phone. The sound reminded her of Dylan's marshmallow-fueled giggles. The memory hit harder than expected. She closed the door to her office behind her and leaned against it for a beat, exhaling slowly. The view from the 62nd floor offered a sweeping shot of the city, endless, glittering, and cold. She turned away from it. By noon, Lena had reviewed 3 contracts, signed off on a real estate deal in Dubai, and declined an invitation to a gala that would have landed her on half a dozen society pages. She didn't care. Not when her mind kept drifting to grease-stained denim and a boy who thought lava rocks were fatal. She picked up her phone. Get me the schedule for the Midtown Community Center, she said to her assistant. I want to make a donation. There was a pause. Anonymous. Of course. The rest of the day passed in a blur of numbers and polished negotiations, but nothing settled the ache in her chest. That evening, she traded her heels for sneakers, pulled her hair into a braid, and left through the service entrance. No driver, no security detail. Just Lena hidden beneath a hoodie again walking toward the same park bench where she'd first met Jacob. The playground was quieter today. A few kids still swarmed the monkey bars, and the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sand. She spotted him near the swings, pushing Dylan gently. His jacket was newer tonight, less threadbare, and his face was smudged with something that might have been grease. She walked up slowly, unsure if he'd even remember her. Did the lava rocks win today? She asked. Jacob turned, and his face lit up with recognition. You came back. I said I would. Dylan kicked his feet higher. Hi. You came. Lena smiled. I couldn't stay away. Jacob gave the swing one last push and let it slow to a stop. We were just about to get dinner. Pizza night. Sounds like a tradition. Only when I've got enough from the shop for an extra topping, he said, brushing his hands on his jeans. She hesitated. Mind if I come with you? He studied her for a moment. You sure? It's not exactly fine dining. I'm not in the mood for fine dining. They walked 3 blocks to a corner pizzeria with a cracked window and a faded chalkboard menu. Inside, the tables were mismatched, the lights too bright, and the smell of garlic overwhelmed everything. Lena loved it instantly. They slid into a booth, Dylan between them, chattering about a school project involving papier-mâché volcanoes. Jacob listened, nodding, occasionally tossing in a question that made Dylan beam. Lena leaned in. You're good with him. Jacob shrugged. I've had practice. Do you ever get time for yourself? He gave a low laugh. Not really. When he's asleep, I fix cars. When I'm not fixing cars, I'm trying to figure out how to stretch a paycheck an extra day. The waitress arrived, and Jacob ordered a large pepperoni with extra cheese. He glanced at Lena. You okay with that? Perfect, she said. When the waitress left, he glanced at her again. You seem different today. Different how? More here. Less. Guarded. She looked away. Maybe I just needed a reminder of what real looks like. Jacob didn't press. Instead, he opened a paper napkin and handed her a crayon from the condiment tray. Lena raised an eyebrow. What's this? Dylan and I play tic-tac-toe while we wait. House rule. No phones at the table. She laughed, drawing the first X. All right. But I play to win. Bring it on, hoodie girl. They played through 2 rounds, Dylan cheering for whoever had the losing streak. The pizza arrived, and they ate like they'd known each other for years, talking about places they'd never been, movies they'd half-watched, and the terrifying experience of assembling furniture without instructions. After dinner, Jacob offered to walk her back toward the park. Dylan held her hand the whole way. At the edge of the street, she paused. Thank you. For tonight. You don't have to thank me, he said. You paid for the pizza. I didn't mean the food. He looked at her, really looked. You okay? She nodded slowly. I think I've been living in a world that doesn't feel like mine anymore. But tonight, I felt like myself. Jacob didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered for a second. You should have more nights like this. Lena's heart thudded. Maybe I will. He stepped back, reluctant. Same time tomorrow? She hesitated just long enough to make him wonder, then smiled. Wouldn't miss it. As she watched him walk away with Dylan's tiny fingers wrapped around his, something shifted inside her. She had a board meeting at dawn, a multi-million-dollar merger to finalize, and a name that carried weight on every continent. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the man who didn't know who she was and who, somehow, made her feel like she could finally breathe. Lena arrived at the park just as the street lamps flickered to life, the sky awash in deep indigo. The air was cooler than the day before, carrying the faint scent of wet grass and city smoke. She spotted Jacob and Dylan near the sandbox. Jacob crouched beside a small castle, helping rebuild a crumbled turret while Dylan offered instructions with the seriousness of a foreman. She paused at the edge, watching for a moment before approaching. Jacob looked up, brushing his hands on his jeans. You're late, he said, not unkindly. There was a boardroom siege, Lena replied. I barely escaped. Dylan looked up. Did you win? Barely, she said. Turns out dragons wear neckties now. Jacob stood, his expression unreadable. He waited for you. Lena glanced at Dylan, who was already patting down fresh sand around the castle walls. I'm glad he did. They walked slowly toward the benches, Dylan running ahead, chasing something imaginary. Lena tucked her hands into the sleeves of her sweater, watching him. He asked if you were coming tonight, Jacob said after a pause. Twice. I don't usually get fans under 4 feet tall. It's flattering. He doesn't latch onto people easily. She glanced at him. Neither do you. Jacob gave a short nod, keeping his eyes on the sidewalk. I've had to be careful. It's not just me I'm risking. They stopped at a bench, and he sat down, leaning back, arms stretched along the top. She remained standing, looking down at him. You ever think about what you'd be doing if things were different? She asked. All the time. Like what? He looked up at her, the glow from the street lamp highlighting the faint lines around his eyes. I used to draw. Used to think I'd be an architect. Build something that lasted. What happened? My dad got sick. Bills piled up. I dropped out after my 2nd year and started working wherever I could. Then Dylan came along. Lena sat beside him, slowly. Do you miss it? Every time I pass a construction site. But I do it all the same. He's my reason. She glanced at him, something stirring beneath her ribs. You don't resent any of it? I resent the world sometimes. Not him. They sat in silence for a beat, the sounds of the city humming around them. A siren in the distance. A dog barking. Dylan's laughter as he climbed the jungle gym. Lena turned toward him. What would you build, if you could? He looked at her, surprised. You mean now? Yes. He thought for a moment, then exhaled. A library. With big windows. And a garden out back where kids could run around. No late fees, no memberships. Just somewhere quiet where people could breathe. She blinked, caught off guard. That's not what I expected. I'm not really interested in skyscrapers anymore. I think people need peace more than they need height. Lena leaned back, folding her arms. You'd be good at that. He glanced at her. And you? What would you be doing if the world didn't need your spreadsheets? She hesitated, caught off guard. I'd be painting. Seriously. She nodded. I haven't picked up a brush in years, but there was a time I wanted to study in Florence. I even got in. What stopped you? My father. He tilted his head. Didn't approve? He thought it was a waste of time. Said I needed to learn how to run things, not dream. Jacob studied her for a long moment. Did you ever tell him you hated it? I did. He said I'd thank him one day. Did you? She looked away. He died before I could. Jacob sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I'm sorry. I'm not, she said quietly. Not for the way it ended. Just for the things I never said. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that filled itself with unspoken truths. After a moment, Jacob stood. Come on. I want to show you something. She followed him across the park to a small, fenced-in garden behind the rec center. The gate creaked as he pushed it open. This place is abandoned, he said. Used to be a community garden. Budget cuts killed it. Lena stepped carefully between overgrown beds and cracked planters. You bring Dylan here? Sometimes. He likes to dig. I told him it used to be a jungle. He crouched at the edge of a planter and pulled something from the dirt. A tiny sprout, barely more than a leaf and a stem. He planted a tomato seed last week. Said he wants to make his own ketchup. She laughed, covering her mouth. That's oddly ambitious. Don't tell him. He thinks it'll be ready by Saturday. She knelt beside him. Do you think it'll grow? I don't know. Maybe. If it gets enough light. She looked at the tiny sprout. That's all anything needs, isn't it? Jacob turned toward her, and something shifted. The air between them changed, grew heavier. He reached out, brushing a bit of soil from her cheek. I haven't known you long, he said, voice low. But I think you're carrying more than you let on. She met his eyes. Maybe I am. You don't have to pretend here. I know. He leaned in slightly, but not enough to cross the line. Just enough to give her the choice. Lena's heart pounded. She could kiss him. Right now. She wanted to. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, I'll help him with the garden. Jacob smiled faintly. He'll like that. He's not the only one. They stood slowly, brushing off dirt. Dylan was waiting at the gate, arms stretched wide like a scarecrow. You have to pay the toll to leave, he shouted. Jacob raised an eyebrow. What's the toll? Funny faces. Lena didn't hesitate. She crossed her eyes, puffed out her cheeks, and stuck out her tongue. Dylan burst into laughter, running toward her. You win. That was the best. Jacob followed, shaking his head. As they walked back together beneath the glow of the street lamps, Lena felt something settle in her chest, something warm, unfamiliar, and terrifying. She was falling, and she still hadn't told him who she really was. The first snow fell on a Thursday. It dusted the sidewalks in soft white as Lena stood across the street from the Midtown Community Center, her breath curling in the chilled air. She wore a dark wool coat and leather gloves, her phone in one hand, untouched. Inside, she could see Jacob through the window of the rec room, crouched beside a table, helping Dylan and 3 other kids with paper snowflakes. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, and the corner of his mouth lifted as he worked. He looked tired, but lighter somehow. She knew why. 2 weeks ago, the community center had received a mysterious donation large enough to restore the garden, fund youth art classes, and pay staff for the next year. The director nearly cried. Jacob had only heard about it in passing, offhand, while fixing a broken chair in the lobby. Lena never said a word. She crossed the street and stepped inside, the warmth of the old building wrapping around her like a blanket. Jacob looked up as she entered, and something in his eyes shifted relief, maybe, or something deeper. Hey, he said, rising. You made it. Of course, she replied. You promised hot chocolate with whipped cream. Dylan ran over, holding up a crooked snowflake. Do you like it? She took it like it was made of gold. It's perfect. Jacob watched her carefully. You okay? Lena hesitated. Can we talk? Somewhere quiet. He nodded, calling over a volunteer and handing Dylan off with a quick word. They walked out into the hallway, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. She clasped her hands together. There's something I need to tell you. He leaned against the wall, arms folded. All right. I haven't been honest with you. Not because I didn't want to be, but because I didn't know how. Jacob didn't move, but the light in his eyes dimmed slightly. I don't work in finance the way I made it sound. I run Grayson Capital. It's a holding company. My father built it. I inherited it when he died. He blinked slowly. Grayson Capital? She nodded. I'm the CEO. For a long moment, Jacob said nothing. Then he exhaled. That's why you knew so much about the center's budget. I wanted to help, she said. Anonymously. I didn't want you to think I was trying to impress you. He looked at her, expression unreadable. You're a billionaire. Yes. And you've been showing up every day in sneakers and a hoodie. I wanted to feel like myself again. Not the version the papers write about. Just Lena. Jacob rubbed the back of his neck. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't want to ruin what we had. I was scared if you knew the truth, you'd treat me differently. Or worse, not trust anything I said. He looked down the hallway toward the classroom. You know what's crazy? I thought maybe you were hiding something. I just didn't think it was that. I'm sorry. He studied her face. You really thought I'd walk away if I knew? I didn't know what to expect. Most people see the money before they see me. Jacob stepped forward slightly. I see you, Lena. I've seen you since the day you caught that frisbee. She laughed, tears stinging her eyes. That was a terrible catch. Yeah, he said, but it changed everything. She looked at him, heart racing. So what now? Jacob reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, handing it to her. She opened it slowly. It was a sketch, rough pencil lines, but detailed. A library, big windows, a garden in the back, and a small sign over the double doors, the Stone Learning Center. Her fingers trembled. You drew this? He nodded. I started it last week. I didn't know what I'd do with it. But now I do. What do you mean? I want to build it. Not with charity. Not with someone writing a check. I want to draw the plans, raise the walls, paint the doors. I want Dylan to see that his dad built something permanent. She folded the paper carefully. Then let me help you. Not as a billionaire. As someone who believes in you. Jacob looked at her for a long moment. You're not exactly easy to forget, Lena. And you're impossible to walk away from. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. This isn't the world I thought I'd be in. It's not the world I thought I'd want, she said. But I'd trade every boardroom for one more night with you. He didn't hesitate. He kissed her slowly, deliberately, his hand cupping her cheek. She melted into him, everything else slipping away, the titles, the wealth, the pressure. Just him. Just her. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. You're still the woman who played tic-tac-toe like it was a sport. And you're still the man who carries gauze in a backpack. They walked back toward the classroom hand in hand. Dylan looked up and grinned. Did you tell her about the library yet? He asked Jacob. I did, Jacob said. Lena knelt beside him. And I want you to help me plant the first tree in the garden. Dylan's eyes widened. Really? Really? He clapped his hands. Can we make ketchup too? Absolutely, Jacob said with a laugh. Later that week, Lena stood beside Jacob in front of a small crowd gathered on a vacant lot. Snow crunched beneath their boots, and Dylan held the ceremonial shovel with both hands. This place, Jacob said to the crowd, is going to be more than just a building. It's going to be a beginning. Lena looked at him, pride swelling in her chest. He wasn't just a struggling dad anymore. He was the man she loved. And he had no idea that the same woman he once bandaged on a broken park bench had just rewritten both their futures. But now he did. And he was choosing her anyway. Not for her name, not for her money, but for the woman who showed up in the park and never left. And that changed everything. The opening ceremony for the Stone Learning Center took place beneath a sky the color of warm cream, the snow having melted into soft earth that hinted at spring. The building stood proud and clean-lined behind them, all sunlit glass and honey-colored wood, a perfect blend of Jacob's design and Lena's quiet funding. Lena stood beside Jacob at the podium, listening as the city councilwoman praised the project. She nodded politely, but her gaze kept drifting sideways toward him. He wore a charcoal blazer over his usual denim shirt, the sleeves rolled once at the cuffs. His hand brushed hers lightly, grounding her. The crowd clapped as Dylan, holding a pair of giant novelty scissors, cut through the red ribbon with a triumphant shout. Later, when the speeches were over and the guests had drifted inside for the catered reception, Lena and Jacob stayed back beneath the budding cherry tree planted at the edge of the garden. Dylan ran ahead toward the reading nook, where a circle of beanbags waited. Did you ever think it would actually exist? She asked, watching the glass doors swing closed behind a group of schoolchildren. Jacob exhaled. I imagined it so many times I almost convinced myself it wasn't possible. She turned to him. But you didn't stop. Because of you. She shook her head. I just gave it the oxygen. You lit the match. He looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a small, dark blue box. Her heart stuttered. I've been carrying this around for a week, he said, trying to find the right time. Jacob, I thought maybe I was crazy. You could have anyone. Literally anyone. You're brilliant and powerful and terrifying in the best way. And still, you showed up every day. You laughed with my son. You never looked at me like I was less. Her eyes burned. I don't want to wait for the right moment anymore, he continued. Because you're it. You've been it since the first time you called me Frisbee Hero. She laughed through a rush of tears. He opened the box. A simple gold band nestled inside, delicate and elegant. Marry me, Lena. Not because I need your money or your name. Marry me because no version of my life without you and it makes sense anymore. She didn't hesitate. Yes, she whispered, her voice catching. Jacob, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face into the space between his shoulder and jaw. His arms closed around her, strong and certain. Dylan's voice interrupted them from the steps. Are you guys kissing again? Lena pulled back, laughing. We might be. Good, he said, hands on his hips. Because I already told my class you're getting married, and I want cake. Jacob groaned. You couldn't even wait for an answer? I knew she'd say yes. Dylan said with the stubborn confidence only a child could pull off. You're her favorite person. Later that week, they moved into a cozy townhouse just 4 blocks from the learning center. It had creaky stairs, a backyard just big enough for a vegetable patch, and a front porch where Dylan liked to sit with a comic book and a popsicle after school. Lena kept her office at Grayson Capital but stepped back from daily operations, delegating to the team she'd spent years building. She spent more mornings at the learning center than in boardrooms, teaching art classes to kids who reminded her of herself before the gloss and pressure took over. Jacob, now formally licensed and working with a small architecture firm he co-founded with a former classmate, spent his days designing schools, libraries, and community spaces. He still fixed the occasional engine on weekends, though now it was more for fun than survival. They married in the garden behind the learning center in late spring. Dylan walked Lena down the aisle with a crooked bow tie and a tooth missing. Jacob cried when he saw her, and Lena did too, unapologetically. There were no society photographers, no press releases. Just friends, laughter, and a cake that Dylan insisted be chocolate with raspberry filling. During their vows, Jacob took Lena's hand and said, You gave me back my future. And she replied, You gave me a place to belong. They danced under string lights hung between the trees, barefoot by the end of the night. Dylan fell asleep in a pile of coats on a bench, a piece of cake still in his hand. When the last guest had left, Lena and Jacob sat on the porch steps, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. You know what I realized? She murmured. What? I never missed the penthouse. He kissed the top of her head. That's because we built something better. Together, they watched the stars come out, their hearts steady and full, knowing the life they built wasn't just real, it was theirs. Forever.